Can I hold out against huge hordes of creepy enemies? If I build my army and castle large enough while researching new developments, I might stand a chance. Find out what happens today as I play 100 Days of Cataclismo. My hope began with the Citadel. It was more than just a home base. It provided safe air and a controlled climate. The team was really small. It only consisted of 2 members. The first, Iris, a powerful scholar of the Artis, which is pretty much just magic, and Hogar, a bowman. Together, these 2 are single-handedly going to rebuild society. Well, at least I hope so. Alright, the clock's ticking. We gotta get to work. I quickly scouted out the resources nearby. We had all the essentials: wood, stone, and minerals. And I even saw some weird creatures to the east. Honestly, I can't complain about our setup. In addition to the Citadel, I was able to construct stone and wood walls, as well as a couple different gatherers, an air filter, a beacon, and a shack. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot the most important building, a barracks. The first building that I actually ended up placing down was a sawmill. We're gonna need a steady supply of wood because almost every building requires it. I then found a location to put down the quarry. It appeared that its placement was incredibly vital because it determined how much stone and minerals that we would be able to collect with it. The sawmill was now completed. It appeared that there were 2 different workers hauling over some wood to the Citadel. I also saw another 2 workers chopping down the trees. This is probably why we saw our available population drop down to 5. While the quarry was constructing, I sent Iris and Hogar over to the monsters to the east. I really hope that they're just hanging out over here to give us a warm welcome. Well, that's definitely not the case. The scary creatures started charging at Iris and Hogar. They did what they had to and took out the hostile monsters. I had them continue to explore into the deep and dark shadows, which gave off a very eerie feeling. I was expecting a jump scare from the monsters at any second, and surely enough, 2 of them were hiding in the shadows. Just these 2 were a lot bigger and had giant horns on their heads. Iris had gotten hit and took a little bit of damage. Thankfully, it wasn't anything severe, so she could keep exploring. The next group of enemies that they encountered wasn't anything like the first 2. One of the creatures a part of the pack had these very weird green bubbles on its head. It then started screaming and completely exploded. That could have been deadly. I had the team head back to the Citadel as the night was nearing. We needed to make sure that we were ready to defend against any monsters that make their way over. Luckily enough, I was able to see the side that the monsters were going to be attacking at. I was even able to see the exact route they would take. I started to construct a house. I had a decent amount of time before the enemies actually started to show up, so this seemed like a pretty good pastime as I needed to grow the village. This pesky 4x4 hole prevented me from placing down my second house. I tried to fill it in with some wooden struts, thinking that these would be able to support a whole house. Unfortunately, they weren't able to, and the monsters were now on their way. Oh no, I forgot to build the fences. I paused time with the magical artist, allowing me to lay out a whole wall. The magical monsters were scared of the trees. It seemed like they couldn't go into them. So I ended up putting my wall directly between 2 groups of pretty large trees. The monsters now only had one option to get to the Citadel. It was to go through this wall. I sent Iris and Hogar over to the wall to defend it. I filled in the little hole next to the shack with some stone blocks. This allowed me to place down yet another shack, and even another one. I realized that my defenders had no way of getting onto the walls. So I built a little staircase with some blocks and wooden stairs. Oh wow, there's only 2 of them? I think we're a bit over-prepared for these guys. Oh wait, there's a third one. The 3 feeble horrors that approached my wall didn't even stand a chance. It was pretty funny because they had been taken out before they even made it to the wall. From surviving that night, I was rewarded 1 point. This allowed me to invest in some new structures or buildings. Wow, that is a lot of unlocks. I considered all of my different options until I had finally decided on the lobber. This was a unit that I could unlock at the barracks that threw bombs. But first, I gotta actually build the barracks. I then destroyed one of the shacks that I placed down when the monsters were attacking. I was clearly in a rush and didn't line it up diagonally with the rest of the houses. There we go. In addition to wood, stone, and minerals, purified air was also a necessity. You couldn't really just breathe the air closest to the ground. It wasn't clean enough in this post-apocalyptic world. So you might be wondering, how are we gonna get air then? Well, I'm gonna have to build a pretty high tower and place down an air filter on it. The higher up we go, the more air we'll be able to collect. The whole village depends on our clean air supply. Every person and most of the buildings require a decent amount of purified air every single day. It's vital that we have a constant supply that doesn't go into the negatives. Otherwise, people aren't gonna make it. As the first air purifier of the village constructed, I placed down a rather large staircase directly to it. We did need to be able to access it after all. Now that's what I call an impressive staircase. It was time to place down the barracks. We now had a constant supply of airflow and a large enough population. The only thing missing now is a good place to put it. I noticed that there was a large chunk of land just missing. I started filling it in with hopes of being able to use the area for the barracks. My stone supplies were getting dangerously low. Unfortunately, I think I'm gonna have to wait a little while before I could fully fill this thing in. The second night was approaching. That meant that the monsters were gonna be here soon enough. I was really hoping to have a third unit ready by tonight. I knew that I wouldn't actually need it, but it's always better to be more prepared than less. It appeared that the monsters were attacking from the same exact side they attacked on last night. This was pretty convenient because we had already built a wall on that side. This time, there were more than just 3 monsters attacking. It seemed like we saw at least around 20. I was pretty shocked about this because this was a huge increase compared to the night before. I'm gonna hate to see what the 10th night looks like if the monsters are multiplying at this rate. I got another point to unlock some new technology. It appeared that this pack had quite a few new stairs, as well as a stone doorway. Real quick, if you're enjoying the video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for more. If you want to get more involved in the Vortide community, check out the Discord linked down below. There is some really cool lore that brings some of the videos together, and a cool leveling system. Join now. I was getting a little bit annoyed that I wasn't producing stone quick enough. I really wanted to fill in that hole to put the barracks on top of. So I placed down another quarry. Since I did it with stone and minerals, I figured I would do it with wood too. I found another location to place down a sawmill. This one was located right next to the wall that we had just previously built. This chunk of trees was perfect because it allowed the sawmill to be 100% efficient. Surely enough, by placing down those 2 new gathering huts, I no longer had the population to support a barracks. This made me construct another shack. I even ended up placing down 2 just because I knew that we were going to be flying through workers like crazy. While those were constructing, I scouted out another area to place down my next air filter. It only seemed logical to build it right next to the other one. Wait, what just happened? Why were those monsters attacking us? It's not even nighttime. My new air filtration station was looking pretty good. It just needed a staircase. Now that looks pretty cool if you ask me. Thankfully enough, the monsters were attacking again on the same exact side. This allowed me the freedom to be able to spend the stone on filling in the gap for the barracks. Once it was completed, I wasted no time at all and immediately got it down. Well, here goes nothing. Surprisingly enough, the barracks had finished constructing before any enemies had actually arrived. I started training a lobber, and then also started an upgrade for archers to increase their damage. Oh boy, here they come. The monsters charged my walls with great speed and great numbers. They even seemed a little bit faster than the previous couple nights. This meant that the horrors were not only just increasing in numbers, but they were also increasing in speed, and probably strength. It's a good thing I was prepared with that extra unit. I received my 1-point reward from the night. I then started to make the wall 1 block higher. This looked like it reinforced it and made it even stronger. I was enticed to try adding yet another layer. Sadly, it looked like no physical changes were actually made to the wall this time though. In the background, when I was doing some construction, Iris and the team headed out to explore. They encountered a pretty large group of enemy monsters, but it wasn't anything that they couldn't handle. With ease, all of the monsters were taken out, and the group was able to continue exploring these eerie lands. After a while of running around, it was time to head back to the base before the night began. I realized that I never used my point from the previous night to unlock something new. After weighing out my options though, it seemed like a better idea to save up and unlock some of the more complex things. Oh yeah, and I trained another bowman. Hogar has a friend now. As my troops were heading back to the home base, I noticed this random horse-looking monster. Once it was killed, it turned into 4 smaller ones. Now that was pretty disgusting, not gonna lie. I rushed my troops to the wall as the night was approaching. It looked like 2 monsters were ahead of the party and were already attacking my walls. Thankfully it was only 2. After placing down a shack and waiting a little bit of time, the monsters finally decided to show up. I was pretty surprised on how light the wave was. Maybe it was because we had an extra archer, but we melted those enemies before they could even make it over to the wall. I received my reward point from surviving the night. I now had 2 in total, but I didn't want to spend both of them. I wanted to save up to 4 and be able to unlock the warehouse. It seemed like an appropriate time to build another air filter. The more that I was keeping track of the air supply, the better. One day, if we're ever going to need to hire a whole bunch of troops very last second, we'll have enough air, and if we don't, then I guess that just spells doom for us. I picked an area right behind a little patch of trees. This was an ideal spot to place down an air filter. The reason being is that if any monsters try to attack the front of it, they'll be met with trees that they can't get past. And if we get a wall up and going, then it'll almost be untouchable. I was able to utilize the new stone spiral stairs. Wow, that was a mouthful. These stairs only took up a 4x4 and were able to get up pretty high. I think around 5 blocks or so. Despite my genius architecture with the stairs, I ended up lacking in planning. I had completely forgot that the access point for the air filters was on the left side, and the stairs were going up to the right side. There we go. We'll just pretend like that didn't happen. The monsters seemed to be consistently attacking only on the east side. I expanded the eastern wall by 1 layer because of this. Surely enough, the monsters were gonna attack the east side once again. I guess they're just wild monsters after all. Who said they have any brains? As I awaited the creature's arrival, I placed down a beacon to the west. This allowed me to build in a certain radius around it where I couldn't build before. I then started construction on a new wall to the north. Even though the creatures weren't directly attacking this side, I knew that I was gonna need a wall here at some point, so I might as well get it going. A random hole filled with mist was starting to make me mad. I couldn't really build in it, so it made building the northwest side of the wall super annoying. Alright, wall building can wait. The monsters are here. There seemed to be a lot more of them than the previous night. Honestly, that shouldn't be something that I complain about. Having less enemies attack our base is probably a good thing. It seemed like the lobber was efficient and doing a pretty big area of damage. The only thing is, it seemed like he actually lacked on the damage he did. 2 of them defending at the same time should fix that problem. I finally had 4 unlock points, so of course I unlocked the warehouse. I then started mapping out an area for the southern wall and actually built it. Oh yeah, and I also built a stone quarry right outside the wall area. Nice, that should do the trick. Oh shoot, I forgot to fill in the left side. Hopefully I have enough stone to get this done. The southern wall was finally completed. This allowed me to place down some new houses in a completely secure spot. I really don't want any villagers to come out of their house and get mauled by creatures, so it's a good thing that these houses are in enclosed walls. Coincidentally enough, it looked like there were going to be some monsters attacking on the southern side as well as the eastern side. It's a good thing that I had just built that wall and trained a couple more troops. I guess the only thing that I have to worry about is getting them on top of the wall. Well, that's one side. Since the wall wasn't connected between the trees, I built a whole nother staircase on the other side. I even had to make the wall 1 block taller because that's how high the stairs brought it. Here goes nothing. This will be our very first 2-front assault. I hope that I have enough units. The creatures attacking on the south side didn't actually attack my wall first. They went after the quarry. Well, that's annoying. I guess on the bright side, it's only 4 of those large monsters with the horns. They for sure weren't gonna make it through the walls unless I left them unattended, and that wasn't gonna happen. My troops got their job done and took out all 4 of the creatures. I didn't realize it yet, but the night wasn't over. Another round of enemies were heading directly towards my walls. Right as the second wave of creatures began, I finished training another lobber. This made defending the southern wall a whole lot easier. Nice, my rewards came in. This time, I got 2 of them. It seemed like since last night and going forward, we'll be getting 2 for every single night we survive. I'm even positive that that number will increase the longer we hold out. After placing down a few more houses, I decided that it was time to build a warehouse. The mineral stockpile was pretty much full, and we weren't using any of it anytime soon. It only made sense to expand its storage so we could accumulate more for later. I then drew my attention back over to the northeast. I started filling in some walls around the hole with mist. Since I didn't really feel like dealing with it, I figured I would just go around. I really hope this doesn't complicate things later, but it just seems like the easiest approach. A random idea had come to my head, and it worked. I was able to place down an air filter on top of the barracks. So I built a staircase all the way up there and then put an air filter down. Now that's what I call innovation. It appeared that in the warehouse building, there were a couple different technologies that I could research to increase the gathering rates of the different materials. I'm for sure going to be investing in that. Night is coming, and so is innovation. I ended up using the 2 reward points from the previous night on a home extension. This building is used to increase the amount of people living in any adjacent houses. The troops got into position on the eastern wall. It appeared that the monsters were only attacking from the east, which was pretty nice. Uh-oh, that's a lot of big monsters. It seemed like this night's invasion consisted of a lot stronger troops. Thankfully enough, we were prepared for them, and we took them out with ease. The second wave of the night only consisted of the small guys. This wave was definitely a lot less intimidating than the first one. At the end of the night, I got my 2 reward points, which I couldn't really use on anything valuable. I also couldn't really make any upgrades to the castle, so I toggled the next night. The creatures were attacking from 2 different sides. This was going to be a little bit harder than the previous night because my numbers were stretched thin. Logically, I decided to train another lobber, just so we had enough troops for when the actual invasion happened. I also decided to fortify the corner of the southern wall. It happened so quickly. I was rushed on both sides of the castle. These creatures again felt like they were getting even faster, as they were able to make it to the wall without dying. Clearly, this speed boost wasn't enough, because we survived and I got my 2 reward points. I used them on a bulk air filter. This was pretty much an upgraded air filter. Actually, that's exactly what it was. I was able to upgrade my current filters to the bulk air filters. While the regular air filters were being upgraded, I started construction on a new tower for another bulk air filter. I attached it to the southern wall and realized that I was going to have to get a staircase going, or at least a path that connects to it. What I came up with was a little staircase branching off the wall going directly into the tower. This really didn't seem like the most efficient design, but hey, it'll do for now. All of the air filters upgraded to the bulk air filters at the exact same time. That was pretty cool. I hired 2 more archers, built up the southern wall, and then fought off the creatures of the night. The invasion wasn't that crazy. It was 1 wave of the bigger monsters with horns on their heads, and then the small tiny ones. As usual, I survived the night and earned my reward points. This time, I invested them into spikes. These traps both slow and damage the enemy monsters. You really couldn't ask for more out of them. I placed down as many as I could in spots that made the most sense, so where the monsters usually come through. I even ended up double layering the spikes on both the southern and eastern wall. The monsters were all gonna attack from the east side. The troops headed over to the eastern wall, while in the meantime, I started upgrading the northern wall. I had a gut feeling that the creatures were going to attack this wall sooner or later, so it made sense to upgrade it. I spaced out my units to be in a flat line. This was the most effective way that I could have them, at least for range. Wow, these guys look pretty cool. The first wave of monsters was the larger ones with horns. This wasn't too out of the ordinary. The second one, however, had a bunch of the small monsters followed by the weird looking horse ones. In other words, it's the monster type that when it dies, it breaks down into 4 smaller ones, or at least drops the eggs of 4 smaller ones. I can't really tell. Despite their best attempts, we were able to hold out for another night. This time, I received 3 research points. I was super happy with this increase. It's like getting a raise. And now we can spend more points on new technologies. I ended up spending my 6 points on the homestead and banners. The homestead was pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty much an upgraded version of the shack that can house more people. The banners, on the other hand, increase the damage of all units within a certain radius of them. I immediately started upgrading my shacks into homesteads. After allowing a little bit of building time, the upgrades were finished. No villager of mine was going to live in a shack anymore. Since I was already making improvements to the castle, I figured I would just keep that streak going. I took down the wooden staircases that led to the 2 air purifiers right next to the citadel. I replaced both of them with spiral stone staircases because these were a lot more efficient and took up less space. On each of the walls, I decided to add in some banners. I made sure to make it so that the banners were covering every single square on the wall. That way, there wasn't a single troop who couldn't have their damage maximized. I then also added the banners on the southern wall, the same way that I did it on the northern wall. The monsters were already approaching the castle. Night is coming. We were being attacked on both the south and east side, so I split up my troops so that way they could be evenly divided between the 2 walls. I made sure that I had at least 2 lobbers on each wall, and an equal amount of archers. There's only one of Iris though, so I can't split her up. If I really had to though, I would probably group her with the lobbers. Her main attack is pretty much a bomb, but she can throw it further, and it does a lot more damage. So I guess she's essentially just an upgraded lobber. I feel pretty confident about the knight. Even though there's a lot more of those horse guys than usual, it seems like they're not really throwing anything too hard at us. If I was the creature's boss, I would definitely fire them all. The 3 research points came in from surviving the night. I feel like a complete bozo. I had completely put on all of the banners backwards, so I went through and deleted them all just to replace them. It really didn't make a difference as the effect of the banners was still active if they were facing the wrong way, but just for my own reasoning, I wanted them facing forward. Just imagine an enemy army pulls up and they see a bunch of backwards banners. They're gonna think that we're weak. After embarrassingly replacing down those banners, I ended up checking what side the creatures were gonna be attacking from. Surely enough, it was the east and south again. Nothing too out of the ordinary. I didn't really pay attention to it until now, but my spikes were making a big difference. They were slowing down the enemies quite a bit and doing a lot of damage. I guess that's just what happens when you place 5 layers in a row. The 3 points from the night got added to my reserve. I now had 6, and I ended up spending 4 of them on the Captor. This unit type doesn't deal a lot of damage, but it slows down any enemies that are in its area of attack. I'm not gonna lie, I did not expect him to look like that. I told the captor to immediately join the defense on the eastern wall. I then trained another 2 archers, placed down a home extension, and saw that the creatures were attacking the northern wall for the first time. I didn't really know how the attack on this side was gonna go. All I did know was that I needed to make a way to get onto the wall. I ended up going with the classic spiral staircase and built it a little bit taller. I increased the height of the wall by 2, just because the staircase ended on that level. Surely enough, the cherry on top was adding all of the banners that I possibly could to the northern wall. Definitely want those damage buffs. I even started to get creative, and I placed down a little bridge between the north and west walls. Alright, let's see how this goes. The northern wall was charged by a bunch of those spiky-headed monsters. It was pretty convenient because the little mist areas acted like a moat, so the enemies had to go all the way to the bottom of them, and then they would be able to reach my walls. Everything was going super smoothly on the northern wall, so I checked in on the east. I had a lot more confidence on this side because we had defended it a few times before. Both sides were looking in tip-top shape. The first assault on our northern wall went very successfully. We ended up surviving and getting the 3 reward points from the knight. As usual, I didn't really see anything that I wanted to unlock. I made it a goal to start working towards the master warehouse, and that goal became a reality as I survived the next night, earning another 3 reward points. Well, I guess technically it didn't, but I ended up using the points to unlock a special ability on the archers instead of getting the warehouse. I then trained another 2 archers, placed down another air filter, and extended the north and south walls by 1 layer. This time, the monsters decided to attack the northeast part of my wall. It was the weakest area, so it made sense to focus all of their forces there. The larger spiky-headed monsters started the wave off. This was nothing out of the ordinary. We then saw a whole bunch of the little guys, as well as a couple horse units. This seemed like it was just going to be another regular round. That was at least until I saw this giant, disgusting looking monster heading towards my walls. It appeared to have a huge egg sac on its back. I couldn't really tell if that's exactly what it was, but my suspicions were confirmed when I saw a whole bunch of eggs shoot out of it. Now that was nasty. These had to be the mothers of all of the different monsters that were running around. Well, I guess we know where the monsters come from now. Honestly, when you think about it, I kind of feel bad for the little guys. They just spawn in and instantly are deleted. I decided that it was time to get down another air filter. We weren't running out of air, but the army was growing and we needed to sustain it. So I created a little notch in the wall and then placed one down. I also built another house and connected it to the other ones with a few blocks. The night was approaching, and it appeared that we were only going to be attacked on the eastern wall. So I moved all of the troops over there and got them into position. This invasion consisted of a bunch of different creatures. The first few were the tiny looking minions. They were followed by some of the horse units. When I say some, I mean around 10 to 15, so nothing too crazy. That pretty much sums up the first wave. Not too long after, a bunch of abominations were sent in. They're a lot slower, so that's probably why they made up the second wave. They couldn't travel as fast as the horses and little guys. My unit successfully fought off all of the enemies from the night. We had also received our 3 points from surviving. Getting 3 a night didn't seem like enough. I for sure wanted a raise. I had to make do with the 6 points that I had, so I ended up unlocking the Masonry Guild. The guild is supposed to provide a whole bunch of research that basically improves our construction. So in other words, we'll be able to get a lot stronger walls. It seemed like we didn't have enough level ground to build the guild. I ended up making some of my own with stone blocks. And there we go, perfect. While I waited for the Masonry Guild to build, I constructed another air purifier station right on the northern wall. Oh, we're so close. Right once it completed, I checked out what different improvements I could make. 2 of the 3 were for improving the strength of the walls, and the other basically just made our lanterns burn brighter. For only an additional 2 research points, I was able to improve the Masonry Guild, which unlocked some more research, which was Reinforced Traps and Masterful Masonry. The names of both of those technologies summed up very well what they did. Traps could become more durable and last even longer, and the walls could get even stronger. Honestly, once we research all of the upgrades for the walls, I don't think that these monsters are even gonna stand a chance. The night's invasion began with attacks on the north, east, and south walls. Since we were being attacked on all 3 sides, I had to spread my troops very thin, which wasn't ideal. A few of the hideous abominations made it over to the northwest side of the castle. They weren't very effective, and my troops handled them very quickly. Over on the southern wall, it was a different story though. The monsters looked like they were doing a little bit better. After a little bit of time, my troops got the upper hand and the enemy monsters were defeated. It was strange because the night didn't end. I didn't know what was going on. There's nothing that sending out a little raiding party can't help. My troops, led by Iris, started following the trail that the monsters were supposed to be coming from. After a little bit of investigating, they discovered an abomination at the bottom of a random mist pit. I'm not gonna lie, if I was that monster, I would be embarrassed. How does that even happen? Since Iris and the rescue party were already outside of the castle, I sent them out even further. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but it just seemed like a good idea to explore in case we came across any more material deposits. Unfortunately, that didn't really seem like it was gonna be the case, just because I kept bumping into monsters and even more monsters. I ended up sending the raiding party back to the castle as night approached, and then built a little notch to place down another air filter. I started to realize something. It felt like the days were getting shorter and shorter. This meant that the longer we survive, the less time we're gonna have to prepare for each invasion. Despite this harsh realization, I found some comfort in a fact that we learned the previous night. It doesn't turn morning until all of the enemy monsters are defeated. If I really have to, I could keep one monster alive at the end of the night attacking my walls while I got done whatever I needed to finish. Speaking of walls, I decided to make some major upgrades by making my current ones a lot taller and a lot wider. Oh yeah, and you can't forget about the damage buffing banners. I then invested my research points into Stone Pack 2 and Stone Pack 3. What I was really trying to get out of them was a doorway with a door. I know that sounds funny, but I currently only had a doorway that didn't have any doors in them. This pretty much meant that this whole time the monsters could just run right into my castle. I guess it's a good thing that monsters aren't really known for being smart. I ended up using all of the wood in my storages to build a doorway on every single wall. I unfroze time with the artist after I was satisfied with all of the gates that I placed. The night resumed as normal. We were only being attacked on one side, which was going to be an easy defense. Being the way that I am though, I decided to upgrade the walls a little bit taller and a little bit wider. I also accommodated my taller fortifications with a brand new staircase. There really is no sense in making the walls higher if we can't get troops on top of them. As my warriors made their way up onto the new construction, I ended up freezing time so that way I could get down the damage buff banners that I forgot to place. Soon after, the invasion began. Nothing looks cooler than having your army shoot down 1,000,000 arrows and bombs towards the enemies rushing your castle. These guys are definitely getting what they deserve. We're just trying to live here peacefully and survive this apocalypse. Honestly, I don't even know how all of these monsters even found us. It must be all the construction noise. Spooky night number 20 had come to an end and I received my 4 research points. This time, I invested them into the Master Sawmill technology. This allowed me to upgrade my regular sawmills into having more workers and increasing the speed that we collect wood at. In what felt like a matter of minutes, the night was already here. The monsters proudly marched their way over to the eastern wall. This was the second night in a row that they were attacking from this side. That means that they're not gonna attack this wall for the 3rd night in a row, right? I quickly found out after using my newly acquired research points on increased military cap and expanding our borders. Technically, they were going to attack the same wall again, but they were also attacking every other side of my castle. Tonight's gonna be very rough. In preparation, I started upgrading my western wall to reach as far as it possibly could out. Then, as usual, I placed down my damage buff banners. I knew that I had to split my army into 3 different groups to survive the night. It was nice because the north wall and the west wall were connected, so I could get away with only splitting my army into 3 groups instead of 4. So that's exactly what I did. It looked like the monsters had to spread out their troops as well to do this attack. They had very thin waves approach each side of the castle. This didn't seem like the best attack strategy to me, but hey, I'm not complaining. As the night wrapped up, I ended up using my research points on the master warehouse. This upgrade to the warehouse allows it to store more minerals, wood, and stone. It also looks like I can get more upgrades to increase the productivity of my workers. The night was upon us as the monsters were attacking the southern wall. They were in full force over here, so we were going to see a larger group of enemies in a concentrated area this time. The wave started off with a whole bunch of those really weird looking horse monsters. I then saw a bunch of abominations following behind them. I counted at least 8, which was a little bit less than what I was expecting. I guess I'm going to just have to save my excitement for another day. I'm sure after another few nights, we'll definitely see more than 8. I used my research points from the night on reinforced spikes. These ended up using a little bit of minerals to make the spikes a lot more effective in dealing damage. So now when the monsters walk through them, they're going to be taking a lot more damage and hopefully being slowed down even more. I used quite a bit of resources to upgrade the spikes that I currently had placed down. Weirdly enough, I didn't realize that the reinforced spikes also consumed oxygen. So I ended up placing down a bunch of wooden spikes just so I wouldn't be super low on it. Oh geez, another all-sided attack. I sent my troops to their respective walls and got them ready for what was to come. When the monsters first arrive, it's always so intimidating. They look so confident charging in at full force. It's not until we get around halfway through the wave that I realize we got this on lock. It also helps that we have really high walls, which are super strong. Despite not having the biggest army, the walls definitely make up for it, as they're able to get hit a million times, while our small number of defenders are able to take out all of the monsters. Talking about our lack of troops, I decided to use my research points to increase the military cap so we would be able to get 5 more. I then started to upgrade some of the spikes on our eastern wall, and then moved my troops into position to defend for the night. This doesn't look like it's going to be too bad. I was really torn on what unit I wanted to use my research points on. I could get an explosive powder ball for my lobbers, or a stunning net that does more damage for the captors. I ended up going with the upgrade for the captor, and then placing down a master warehouse. This construction drained most of my wood and oxygen. I got the inspiration to build another air collector. This time, I built a little ledge on my eastern wall just because I wasn't using any of the airspace over there. It also just so happened that the enemies were going to be attacking from the eastern wall. So I moved all of my troops over from the southern wall through my castle all the way up onto my eastern wall. It's officially my favorite time of the night, when the monsters arrive. Nothing beats the experience of seeing very creepy looking animals running towards you and not knowing if you're going to be surviving the night or not. I received my 4 points and ended up using them on an autonomous pump. This upgrade automates the collection of oxygen on the oxygen collectors. So in other words, less workers are going to be required to run the pumps. I ended up placing down 4 in total. This meant that I was going to be able to get some of my workers back. After placing down a few more traps, I survived yet another night. I unlocked an artist spell called Thunderbolt. The spell is a single strike that deals AoE damage. Only Iris has the powers to be able to cast it though. I then used one of my leftover points to unlock a lantern pack. Even though we're in the middle of an apocalypse, it doesn't hurt to make things look aesthetic. I opened up the Masonry Guild and ended up buying the upgrade of Mist Fuel lanterns. Soon after, a whole bunch of monsters started to attack the southern wall. It started to feel like these guys weren't playing around anymore. There were a lot more enemies than usual, and on top of that, they were moving pretty quickly. Well, no more easy nights I guess. As I watched my troops rain down arrows on all of the monsters, I realized that the army was getting pretty big. This was pretty awesome because we were gaining power in the apocalypse, and that's one thing that you definitely need in an apocalypse. As the night wrapped up, I got my 4 research points. I ended up spending them on the powder ball. This is the upgrade that allows my lobbers to have explosive bombs to throw. Since I had quite a bit of resources, I ended up purchasing the mineral trolleys. This increases the rate that minerals are produced. Well, I guess technically, how quickly we gather them. I'm not gonna lie, our walls are pretty impressive. You know what would make them even more impressive? If they were taller. The second that I added on one more block to the southern wall, it completely fortified and made all the walls under it become a lot stronger. Of course, I did this to the rest of the wall. I also expanded it outward by 1 layer. There we go, perfect. Actually, wait, I feel like we're missing something. I started construction on an archer tower. I honestly had no idea how I wanted to build this and if it would even be stable. My plan was just to keep placing down random blocks and hoping that it would work out. Alright, that looks pretty decent, we're getting there. I really didn't know what to expect with this archer tower. I had no idea if it was actually going to be effective. Honestly, I just wanted the tower to be symmetrical, and it was when looking from the top down. I guess this will do. With the towers now done, I just needed to put the cherry on top. Or in other words, the banners on top of the walls. The entire army made it onto the southern wall. It was time to test out the brand new tower. I wanted to make sure that I had every single unit type up on top of the tower, just so that way I could see which one is more effective up there. I couldn't really tell yet, but it looked like the people on the archer tower were shooting a little bit further than the ones on the wall. But also, they technically were closer to the enemies as the archer tower protruded out. We finished off the last abomination, and then I used the 4 points rewarded on fire arrows. It appeared that I was only able to supply my troops with these arrows by placing down a little stand, having all of the troops in a certain radius around it get them. Wow, now that's one nice looking army. As usual, the night had arrived very quickly. and we had finished it just as fast. I was finally able to place down some spikes on the western front. I then increased the military cap and trained 3 more archers. Another night had gone by, but this time we had received 5 reward points from it. I decided to ignore the points for the time being and upgrade my northern and western wall. Only by 1 block taller though, of course. Since my wall was growing, I needed to build a new staircase that actually made it up to it. I first started with a little platform so I could place the stairs on top of. I actually ended up expanding the platform and making it 1 row higher, just so that way the spiral staircase could reach the top. I then wanted to expand our kingdom's reach, so I built an elevated surface on the northwestern wall and placed down a beacon. This is going to allow me to build any buildings I want in an extended range now. And of course, don't forget about the damage buff banners. I continued to expand onto the northern side of the wall. I unfortunately realized that this was going to block the air filters, so I had to pretty much raise them up 1 level. But that sounds like a later problem. I don't want to do that now, especially since I had a little bit more pressing matters. Monsters were about to be attacking our castle. Right before they arrived, I used 4 out of my 5 research points to reinforce the citadel's walls. This was an upgrade that just gave the citadel a lot more HP points. Let the night begin. As we were fighting off the waves of enemies, I realized that the beacon I placed down earlier wasn't in effect. That was because we didn't have a staircase leading up to it and it wasn't accessible to keep the fire burning. The night finished off and I increased my military cap. The next one also flew by, but this time I unlocked claw traps. These pretty much just reminded me of bear traps. These claw traps though slowed down any monsters that walked over them, and it also got all of the monsters that were within a little radius of them. I placed down a whole bunch on the northwestern side of the castle. That was because the enemies were going to be attacking from there, but also there were just a lot of enemies that came over to the side in general. It looks like the traps did their job and slowed down the enemies that walked over them, making them easy targets. My new technology of the day was tactical expertise, which unlocked a whole bunch of new toys for the troops. One of them happened to be hell arrows. These lit the monsters on fire and dealt burn damage to them over a long period of time. They were very similar to the fire arrows, but they did a lot more damage and burned a bit longer. I then started adding some more houses to the middle residential area. And then I added another nook to hold an air filter as well as another autonomous pump. I decided to train 2 new rangers as I was able to support a larger army. I also got a good example of why the reinforced spikes are overpowered. Those monsters did not make it far. The night ended up coming to a standstill as it seemed like there were no more monsters attacking. I sent out a little raiding party and they had found an abomination hiding away in the mists. The raiding party then took it out and the night came to a close. I unlocked a brand new magic spell. It was called Mist Leap. It allowed any of my troops within a certain radius that I determined to teleport back to the citadel. This will be great for scenarios that I have a bunch of troops outside of the castle and the monsters start to approach. It'll save us the run back. Another night flew by, and I was able to increase our military cap with the research points that I had gained from it. Since I was using the natural rock formations to pretty much be a part of the wall, I tried to see if I could build some stones on them. Unfortunately, I couldn't. It just wouldn't be stable enough. Iris and a group of 9 archers headed outside of the castle. They were going out to explore the north side as we didn't really get to see what was over there. It wasn't long until they stumbled upon a huge group of enemy monsters. It looked like they were surrounding a weird ruin that they had converted into a home. More and more monsters kept spewing out of it, which was pretty concerning, because how were all of these monsters able to fit in there? There were so many monsters that the team started to get overrun, and they had to retreat back a little bit. Iris got the situation under control by using the magical artist. They then slowly got closer to the ruins and started destroying it. After the arrow barrages, the ruin finally collapsed, and there was one more that needed to be taken down. From the ruins, there was random salvage that we were able to take. It appeared to be 400 wood, which wasn't bad. Surprisingly enough, there were more ruins. But night was approaching, so Iris and the team had to run right back to the castle. This night's invasion was happening on 2 sides, and it wasn't anything special. The troops really didn't struggle at all with any of the enemies. In the following morning, I unlocked the Master Quarry. Just like with the Master Sawmill, this is pretty much an upgrade for the stonecutters. I expanded the width of the eastern wall by 1 and then sent out Iris and the team. We weren't going to let the monsters have their homes in these lands, especially if they're not going to be friendly towards us. This ruin seemed to have a lot less creatures in it. It was also a lot weaker, so we were able to take it down in the snap of a finger. It appeared that they were hogging a stone mine, and there was even another ruin just chilling nearby. It was taken down in a matter of seconds, and it was only right for us to continue exploring until night. There were quite a few dead ends, and also monsters kept jumping out of nowhere. These guys aren't going to be too happy once they see that their homes are destroyed. I guess you really could make the argument that we were being unfair to the monsters. But they were attacking us every single night, so they're not going to get away with that. After a while of exploring, the team needed to head back to the castle as it was becoming nighttime. There's one issue with that. They're super far away. I ended up utilizing one of the spells that I had recently unlocked called Mist Leap. All of the troops immediately teleported back to the citadel, and I was able to station them onto the walls to be ready for the night. Honestly, without that spell, we would have been doomed. Or at least the raiding party would have. In the hordes of enemies, I realized that there were some monsters that were kind of glowing blue. It also appeared that they had a little bit of extra health. I'm going to call these overshields, because in addition to their health, they also have this extra damage they can take. Despite some of the monsters having overshields, we were still able to survive the night. I used the points that we got, plus one additional one from the previous nights to unlock the air trader. This building allows us to trade oxygen for other materials. It's definitely a good feeling to know that there's still other people out there. If we were the only ones left on this planet, that would be very devastating and honestly, very scary. It took quite a while, but I was able to construct the air trader. I guess to be fair, we are building a whole system to be able to trade goods. These things take a while. It appeared that I was going to have to pay around 150 oxygen for each material, even a little bit more for the more rare ones. This inspired me to look into the loyalty card. Each time that I buy a material with the oxygen, the prices increase. This upgrade reduces the amount that it increases by. I further saw the importance of oxygen in our society. It seemed like it was the main currency for everything, as it was what was keeping us all alive. So I built another little tower with an air collector on top of all of the houses in the center of the castle. It seemed like the monsters weren't too fond of the loyalty program. They started charging my walls with rage and with great numbers. Despite their constant attempts, I was able to survive the night. I then unlocked the mist condenser, which is a building that collects the gas from the mist. It seems like the gas, otherwise known as mist fuel, is used in a lot of explosives and machinery. Despite building the new air collector right above the houses, I ended up having to build a staircase to it. I completely forgot that it needed to be reachable by my workers. No way, I'm able to stack more houses up here. It got a lot closer to invasion time, and I wanted to see if I could find a spot to place down one of my mist fuel collectors. It seemed like I was really going to have to expand my area of operations with beacons if I really wanted to utilize all of the pools of mist fuel nearby. In the very next morning, I unlocked the Merlone pack. These can be used on the castle walls to further reinforce them and also provide a range boost for any unit that's standing behind them. These provide such a big defense boost to the walls underneath them that my current walls got upgraded to the next tier of strength. After messing around with the Merlone pack, I finally placed down a mist fuel collector. This really didn't seem like the best spot to be placing one because the enemies attack on this side, but it was pretty much all that I had available. I then could finally afford an oxygen silo. These required mist fuel to operate, so I wasn't able to build one until now. I became inspired to see how much taller I would have to make the wall in order to get them to the next strength level. That seems very doable. I really only need 2 more of these blocks. I made some more renovations around the base. One of them included expanding the northern wall. I then fought off the monstrosities of the night and realized that I was at negative mist fuel the next morning. Well, that makes a lot of sense. My mist fuel collector was destroyed. I found a new spot to try and place one down, but there was no guarantee that this one would make it either. I guess I'll just have to keep replacing them every night. I then used my points to unlock the Bomber's Workshop. Oh yeah, and it looks like I'm getting around 6 points from every single night now. That's pretty impressive. Another issue that I noticed was going on in the castle was that we were low on population. This presented me with a challenge. How could I increase the max amount of citizens I had while taking up the least amount of space? I started to get creative. My initial thoughts were to stack a whole bunch of houses on top of each other. The only way that that's really gonna work though is if I position them like stairs. Against one of the walls of my castle, I decided to try it out. I placed down 2 houses with a little 4x4 gap in between them. I then built a home extension in that space. I placed down a whole bunch of blocks right behind all of the houses, and that allowed me to stack up another 2 houses behind the other ones. After adding a few staircases and throwing down some blocks, my build was complete. I was pretty impressed with it because it added 16 to our population and really didn't take up that much space. To even further top things off, I placed down an air collector right on top of the houses. Now that's what I call maximum efficiency. At this point, the daily invasions became a casual part of the day. My citizens were so used to having to put up with them as they were happening every single night. Let's just hope that means we don't get sloppy and too relaxed because these monsters are here to kill us after all. It was finally time to place down a Bomber's Workshop. I honestly kind of struggled with this. It's a pretty large building after all, and we didn't have that much space left. So I had to move around the barracks. I ended up finding a spot where I could place them right next to each other and still have a little pathway leading to the staircase that led up onto my wall. The bombers really drained my population even after building all of those new houses. I only had a population of 4 now. This made me build a brand new housing area on a different side of the castle, but this time it was a little bit different. Sweet. Can't forget the air filter though. I'm sure you can guess. The Bomber Workshop finished constructing, and I built myself a cannoneer. You can basically consider this unit artillery. They shoot slowly, but deal massive damage to large groups of enemies. In addition to shooting slowly, these units also move very slowly and take up 4 squares. They are holding a whole cannon after all. I was so excited to try out this new cannoneer unit that I had completely forgot that I had 7 research points available for spending. I decided to freeze time with the magical artist and unlock the volatile cannonball. This upgrades the cannoneer's cannonball to deal a lot more damage in its area of effect. I wouldn't want to be caught in those explosions. Honestly, having a whole bunch of these guys firing off their cannonballs into the crowds of monsters is going to be so overpowered. After incorporating my new unit type into the army, I decided to build a staircase onto the eastern wall. My current one wasn't bad, but I wanted to use the space to build some new houses. So this one will have to do. I destroyed my old spiral staircase and started placing down my new houses. I ended up copying the design of the very first set of houses I placed against my walls. It just seemed a lot more clean than the second one that I came up with. Just need 2 more houses and the home extension, and we're set. I guess I really didn't need to build another staircase, but I ended up doing it anyways. So now we have 2. Oh yeah, and of course another air collector. Can't forget about those. I now had 13 research points that I could spend on whatever. So I ended up using 12 of my points on increasing our military cap and using the remaining 1 on Wood Pack 1. Since my creative side really came out the last couple of days, I decided to completely redefine the housing area in the center of the castle. I first froze time and started deleting all of the existing houses. Well, actually I deleted them, brought them back, and then completely deleted them. I didn't know that you could use Ctrl-Z to bring back any deleted blocks. I then ended up placing down a little bit of a base, so that way I could lean all of the houses against. This was how I was going to be able to stack more houses. This already seemed to be paying off, as I was able to place down 4 houses and had a whole bunch more space to place another 4, as well as the home extensions. I constructed another 4 houses on the other side of the first initial 4 that I built. Now this was a masterpiece. It's low-key super satisfying to just watch all of the houses build at the same exact time. I realized that I didn't utilize the top platform of this build yet, so I threw down a couple staircases leading directly to the top. Once up there, I was able to place down an air collector and then an air silo. Of course, I had to make some upgrades to the walls, It wasn't fair that I was improving the housing, but not building the walls taller, cause that makes sense. It was pretty good that I was doing this, because I could now move the air collectors up one level on the northwestern wall. They finally no longer have to sit one block lower than what the wall was currently at. Oh yeah, and I completely demolished the staircase and started building a brand new one. This one utilized two techniques, a straight staircase going upward and then a spiral staircase towards the end of it. Building one single spiral staircase all the way to the top wouldn't be stable, hence why I built it this way. Oh yeah, and if you make the walls taller, you gotta put down those banners. I hadn't thought about it until now, but I placed down some fire arrows as well as the banner overlapping on the same tile. This looked like it stacked the damage buffs. It was pretty awesome because I could see each time that a fire arrow was shot off. There was a little red trail behind each one. Now the question is, do I even notice a difference in how quickly we're killing the enemies with the fire arrows? Honestly, it was pretty hard to tell. Things didn't feel faster, but then again, we only had a handful of troops who were actually exposed to the upgraded arrows. As I watched all of our mighty troops defend the castle, I really started to realize how many enemy monsters there actually were. We've made it so far in this apocalyptic world. I still remember the first night when only 3 enemies attacked us. I was distracted with the main forces of monsters on the north and west side of the castle. I didn't even realize that some had snuck over to the south side. I sent a little detachment of troops, including Iris, over to the wall to take them out. Thankfully, they arrived quickly. I decided to test once again how many blocks taller I needed to make my castle walls to get them to the next strength tier. It really wasn't that bad. I only needed to stack 2 1x3s on top of each other. So that's exactly what I planned on doing, making the walls a lot taller. My first contribution to this project was to build a staircase going all the way up to the height of where the walls will be at. Once that was done, I admired my giant looking staircase. I guess it's really just a whole bunch of filling in from this point on. I did a trial run with one of my archers to climb all the way up to the top of the wall. Unfortunately, it looked like he wasn't able to. After being completely and utterly confused, I decided to move my archer out of the way and completely rebuild that portion of the staircase that was causing me an issue. There we go. I guess the other one was just a little bit too narrow. Being pretty curious, I compared the range of the archer on the higher wall versus lower wall. I concluded that the height really didn't make a difference. I then continued placing down blocks on the wall to get it to the height that I wanted. The stone stockpiles were depleting so quickly, it wasn't even funny. I ended up just wanting the monsters to come and attack me so I could make it to the next day and get more stone to finish the walls. I ended up using this strategy for 2 days straight. Build as much as I possibly could, and then get more stone by letting the day progress. I had to move the air collectors a little bit higher up on the walls because obviously I was making the walls higher. It was a little bit of a pain, but we needed to do it this way in order to make sure we had enough oxygen to survive. That should be good for now. We fended off the east side of the castle, making it until morning. I got my 6 research points, which I didn't spend right away. This was becoming a little bit of a habit. I then destroyed a staircase leading up to the northern wall and finally decided on what I was going to spend my points on. I ended up going with the elite quarters. This looked like it was going to be one of those huge construction projects, but I realized that I didn't have enough mist fuel to actually build it. So I started placing down a few more mist fuel collectors and waited until they were finally built. Sheesh, that was a huge jump in mist fuel. The supply instantaneously went from 0 to 10. Well, now that we have enough mist fuel, I want my elite troops. I found a spot to place down the new training building. And surely enough, it was cramped, but I made it work. The day transitioned into night as I fought off the enemies and waited for the elite quarters to build. Another abomination had gotten stuck in one of the pits filled with mist fuel. So I followed the usual procedure and sent out a little group to take them out. Right as they got back to the castle, I unlocked the ballista unit type. This guy was another artillery unit that shot in a straight row. It also appeared that the elite quarters had finally built, so I trained my very first hunter. I still had 3 research points left over that I could spend on any new technology, so I bought a window pack. It costed me 2 points, and I didn't really plan on using it, but I guess we'll see. It was time. I decided to use a whole bunch of stone to upgrade the southern wall. My goal was to get it to the highest strength tier. There was only one issue though. I didn't have enough range to place down all of the blocks that I needed, so I built a beacon to expand the range of where I could build. While it was under construction, I started working on a new staircase. I needed to get it as tall as the wall currently is. That shouldn't be an issue, right? Little did I know, I was about to get really lucky. The stone supplies were dropping like crazy, and I just barely had enough to make it to the top of the wall. I even had to remove my beacon because I needed to put a staircase going downward right where it was sitting. I'm glad I got all of that figured out. I then spent 6 of my 7 research points on Thunderbolt 2. This was pretty much an upgraded version of the spell that Iris could cast. Speaking of upgrades, I started working a little bit on my residential areas. Unfortunately, I ended up deleting some blocks that were vital to the structural integrity of the residence area in the middle. That mistake caused some of the buildings to get destroyed at the very top. I figured that I could utilize this situation by trying to fit another house underneath the current ones. Now that didn't really end up working. I'm hoping that I'll have more success in this new housing area that I'm gonna build. And boom, things are looking good. I somehow managed to get 3 different levels of houses. After surviving the night, I ended up integrating the housing area into the wall. This was a genius idea, because I was able to place down another air collector on top of it. I then picked up a citadel upgrade called Headquarters Defense. This ability unleashes a lot of damage to all of the monsters that are near my citadel, only within a certain radius though. I was presented with an issue. I didn't have a passageway leading out to the north side of my castle. That meant that my troops had to go all the way around if they wanted to get over here. So I cut out a little hole in the northern wall and filled it with gates. This granted any of our troops and workers easy access to this side of the castle. I'm just gonna hope that the monsters don't know how to open doors. This night's invasion was one of the intense ones. I really didn't like when we got attacked on all sides of the castle. In these scenarios, my troops are spread so thinly that I have to watch every single side and make sure that they're getting enough support. And if not, then I have to move troops from one wall to the other. Only having to watch one side is just much more preferable. We were making such good progress researching new things after every single night. I was honestly concerned that we were going to run out of technologies to look into. After spending 12 points to increase my military cap, I built an air silo on top of the housing area in the middle. I also removed the old one that used to be in the corner near the stairs. It seemed to be blocked off by all of the other buildings. I then expanded the eastern wall. It was only by 1 block in width, but still, it's an expansion. I started to think and decided to make the wall a lot taller. I was planning on doing this in the future anyways and had a decent amount of stone, so why not get started now? I was pretty satisfied with these upgrades. I managed to get the first 4 layers of the wall built up to the highest strength level. I didn't see a need to upgrade more than just the first few layers of the wall. If the creatures are able to get past this, then they honestly deserve to get into my base. I needed to make sure that I had my banners on top of the new wall. I decided to also pair fire arrows with the banners to make them more deadly. While it's not obvious what path the monsters took to the wall, I didn't want the eastern side to be too spoiled, so I placed down some fire arrows on the northwest corner of the base. They didn't go to waste. Immediately as the night started, I saw a whole bunch of them being shot off. There appeared to be a little hole at the bottom of the wall. I'm surprised that the rest of it didn't collapse, but the monsters were able to successfully destroy it when I wasn't looking. I didn't even realize it was damaged that much. The day went on, and I was met with a massive horde the next night. This was a one-sided attack, and there were so many abominations, it wasn't funny. They had a slow procession heading directly towards the citadel. Honestly, man, the nerves on these monsters. I noticed that some of the abominations were colored blue. This reminded me about the overshields. As if the abominations weren't tanky enough, they now had even more health. These buffs really didn't do anything for them though. My troops were still mowing them down like they were nothing. The most aesthetic thing about this apocalypse is watching your troops. They honestly just look so sick the way that they're positioned up on walls. With 8 points, I unlocked the very last unit type that I could. These guys were called partisans, and they had a crossbow. At low altitudes, they shot multiple bolts at the same time, while at high altitudes, they shot one bolt that did a lot of damage. In addition to training 2 of them, I also purchased the upgrade of rust-proof crossbows. These increase the damage of the crossbows when they're shot from higher altitude, and that's exactly where I was going to station these partisans. Randomly enough, where the air silo used to be, I realized that there was a little bit of forest sticking out. This inspired me to place down a sawmill. It surprisingly enough was able to get a medium amount of wood just from that little patch. I somehow managed to not see that the enemies were also attacking from the east side in addition to the south and north. I felt like a complete bozo because the monsters were already at the eastern wall and they were destroying it too. Honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed in myself. How did I not even see that? Let's just hope that everything works out, because I sent some troops over to the other wall, but they were taking way too long to get there. So I had to teleport even more of them off the wall to speed things up. Oh yeah, and it looked like monsters were coming from the southwest in addition from just the south. Things are great. After a little while of fighting, it seemed like things got sorted out with our defenses. Thankfully, we have these big strong walls to keep the monsters out. It felt like forever, but we survived the night. I needed to replace down all of my mist fuel collectors because they were destroyed, and we're now at -14 mist fuel. I have no idea how long the special units and special buildings that require mist fuel can survive without it. I didn't have to find out. The mist fuel collectors were able to finish building in such a short time that we were able to get back up to +3 mist fuel. Since they were pretty much all destroyed in the last night, I decided the wall went off. This honestly made so much sense because that way I don't have to keep building one every single day. Unfortunately, I don't know how I'm going to wall off the other area, but I'm sure we'll figure it out in the future. Let's add a little cushion to this bad boy, and we're set. The nighttime flew by, and we had seen another abomination get caught in the mist pits. Since we've dealt with this a couple times now, I now know that every single time a night is prolonged, it's because of an abomination. Even though our castle had massive walls, it was missing one thing. Merlins. They're pretty much like little walls on top of the walls that provide cover for anyone who needs to hide behind them. Extra cover, looking epic, and now an extra range boost? You can't say no to these things. For the most part, these were very easy to use. The only real issue that I had with them was placing them down in corners because I needed one block diagonally behind them. I guess we'll figure that out later. Night's coming. The creatures arrived as usual and we had fought them off. I then used my points to unlock rope bridges and decoys. The rope bridges are self-explanatory. I even got to place them down in the middle of the northern extension part of the wall. All I needed was a little pillar and boom, we got things working. I placed down the last 2 rope bridges. This allowed for easy access between the walls. And that was when all of the monsters decided to rush the castle. I saw some with overshields and I saw some regular. I saw some small ones and I saw some big ones. It seemed like they were really throwing everything at us now, and they're not gonna stop anytime soon. At least until the citadel is destroyed. I received my 7 points from surviving the night and then placed down a warehouse. It seemed like I was always at max capacity for stone. Being able to store more will increase the security of our kingdom. If any of the walls ever get broken down, or we just need to use a lot of stone to rebuild stuff, then we'll be chillin'. I placed down a sawmill kind of outside of the castle. I put it in a spot that I didn't think any enemies would go to. It was pretty much hidden between a bunch of trees and rocks. Unfortunately, some random scouts had made their way over to the sawmill. I don't even know how they saw it. The mill ended up getting destroyed, which was pretty frustrating, but so did the monsters. I definitely got my revenge. I decided to test my luck and place down another woodcutting camp. This time, I'm hoping that no more scouts come over here. I'll even put up some spikes as a deterrent. The evil monsters of the night made their way over once again. This time, they were only attacking from the east. Honestly, this is probably the side of the castle that I feel the most confident about. I feel like I could have half the amount of troops up on the wall and we would still be able to defend this side. I guess it does help that we have 8 layers of spikes that the enemies have to run through before they could even get close to the wall. The monstrous horde continued to just blindly rush into the spikes, as my archers, bombers, and special units lit them up. It was only a matter of time until we started to see the end of the wave. We had taken out so many monsters, well over 100 and maybe even over 1,000, just to see the light of day. I used 6 points to upgrade the stonework on the citadel. This once again gave it more health points so that way it could be hit a lot longer before it actually collapsed. Hopefully, we'll never get to that point, but you never know nowadays, especially with this apocalypse going on. I wanted to test out the decoy on this next night. It was a little bit expensive as it costed mist fuel, but it looked cool. Surely enough, right as it exploded, I was placing down an air filter on the other side of the castle. I heard the explosion and went to go investigate. Unfortunately, I missed it. I guess I'll just have to place down another one. But to be honest, they don't really seem that effective. I had a very mixed opinion on how I felt about them. I decided that I wouldn't be wasting any more mist fuel just to build them. It looks like the good old arrows, bombs, and spikes are gonna have to do. I researched throwing potions and then airtight insulation. It seemed like the throwing potions were basically like the fire arrows. You have to place down a little pit for all the poisons, and the troops nearby will be able to use them. As for the airtight insulation, it pretty much just made all of the houses that it was connected to airtight. So in other words, they wouldn't be leaking oxygen as much. It wasn't really necessary, but to further increase my defenses on the eastern wall, I decided to build a brand new one. This one was right after all of the spikes, so the monsters were going to have to engage with it first. I then very slowly built a staircase leading all the way to the top. It was a little bit tricky, but I managed to get it built. Nighttime was upon us, so I sent my troops up onto the northwestern wall in a very cinematic way. They scaled it and then got into their positions, all ready for the night's watch. And boy, it was quite the watch. Not a single one of my soldiers got a break, because there was a continuous flow of enemy monsters just charging and charging after each other. The night finally did come to an end, and I got my 7 points, which I ended up spending 4 of them on the bomber's sparks. I also got wood pack too. The sparks apparently replaced the cannoneer's main attack, and any enemy that dies under the effect of the sparks ends up exploding and dealing more damage to any other enemies nearby it. It's gonna be awesome to see those in action. I made an interesting decision. I decided to destroy all of the doors that were on the second wall on the east side of the castle. This way, I would be able to use these walls as a way to funnel in all of the enemies, but also not let in too many at the same exact time. One of the abominations got stuck in the mist pit again, so I had to send out a little raiding party to take them out. At the same exact time, I got a couple upgrades for Iris. The first one made a healing spell that she can use heal even more, and the second pretty much increased her health. I made preparations for the next night's invasion. That was when all of the monsters were attacking from every single side. Unfortunately, my sawmill that was supposed to be concealed by the trees was getting attacked. Let's hope that it can survive this invasion. It was intense on every single side of the castle. There was a decent amount of monsters everywhere. I even ended up freezing time just to get my bearings and make sure everything was going well. The next night pretty much started off the same exact way. Lots of monsters coming in fast. Now when I say lots of monsters, I'm not exaggerating. It looked like the whole northern pathway that wasn't covered by mist was completely filled with all of these abominations. One of my archers almost lost their life. It appeared that one of the blocks lower down in the castle had gotten destroyed. This caused one of the overhanging corner pieces on the castle to collapse. Luckily enough, the archer wasn't standing on the very edge of the wall, because if he was, he would have fallen to his death, into a mist pit, and then eaten by monsters. The night wrapped up with no casualties, but I had to teleport my archer who almost died off of the wall. He wouldn't be able to climb back up, so teleportation was the only way possible. It felt like we were almost getting no daytime anymore. The nights were coming so quickly, as well as the invasions. Despite having less preparation time, we were still able to fight off the enemy hordes. I decided that it was finally time to try out the bomber sparks. I unlocked this technology a few nights ago, but I didn't get to try it out yet, so it makes sense to get it down now. I was definitely not disappointed, because each time that the ballistas were shooting, it looked like a bunch of additional explosions happened afterwards. Since there weren't really too many technologies to spend my points on, I managed to save up 28. They didn't really get saved for long though, because I ended up spending 24 of those to unlock an increased troop capacity. It had been a while since I sent out my last raiding party, so I decided to send one out with a whole bunch of archers. After roaming around for a little while, they had come across one of the ruins that it looked like the monsters were nesting at. Oh geez, that's a lot of them. At least 30 to 40 monsters started charging at my troops. Unfortunately though, it looked like night was nearing, so I had to retreat them back to the citadel. Trust me, we'll be back over there to finish the job. This night's invasion was occurring on only the east side of the castle. This meant that it was going to be a lot more chill than our average night of being attacked on more than one side. I feel like an evil genius because I set up this little funnel system that is so effective. I don't think that we'll ever get overrun on the eastern side of the castle anymore, just because of this. My favorite part about this system is seeing all of the abominations crowded up, stuck at the entry point of the wall. They kinda just slowly wobble forward as they meet their demise. I even had to remove some of the walls to make it a little bit easier to fit them in. Surprisingly enough, there were still a couple technologies and upgrades that I could research. The one that I ended up getting was Headquarter Defense 2. This was a continuation from the first one, which basically just increased the hit points of the citadel. Even though the invasions were taking longer, the nights still felt like they were flying by. I even came up with a strategy that was like the funnel, but it was way less expensive. It consisted of placing pillars every couple blocks, so that way the monsters got kinda stuck up on them. And it seemed like a lot of monsters actually ended up getting distracted trying to destroy them. See what I mean? The monsters get tripped up on these things even though they're only one block wide. Unfortunately though, the strategy is only effective until the monsters completely break down the pillars. I guess it's really just more of a way to delay the monsters so my troops have a lot more time to take out as many as they can before getting to the castle wall. I didn't realize it, but my military capacity was fully maxed out again. I even tried training some troops and got a little confused on why they wouldn't train. That was when I realized. I ended up having 25 points and only needed 24 to increase the military cap. So I went in and bought the upgrade. I could now train my troops. I'm really hoping that these extra soldiers help out with this next invasion, just because it's looking really intense, and things aren't looking the best for us. Usually the invaders make it really close to the wall, but they're not on it for super long. It looked like this round they were just camping it. I even saw one of the blocks get all the way down to red health. This meant that it was going to get destroyed soon. This made me move out all of my troops that potentially would be affected by it. I don't want to take any unnecessary casualties. Thankfully, we killed the creatures just quickly enough to prevent any of the wall from collapsing. This block literally just needed to be hit once or twice more and it would have broke. Let's see how things are going on the other side. Oh nice, there really isn't anything to check. We survived the night. We ended up getting in the same exact situation as we were in the previous night. All of the creatures were crowding the wall and they were doing their worst. I think there were even more this time around than there were last time. Look at all those things. Disgusting. It looked like the southern and eastern walls were doing just fine. It was the northwest one that was a little bit shady. As the night came to an end, I realized that some of the walls decided to collapse. They must have lost their stability and just completely decided to give in. That was a little bit scary because the monsters did quite a bit of damage, almost a full layer on the side. Thankfully we have ample stone, because those repairs costed us basically nothing. The time was finally upon us that we weren't able to research any more technologies. We already researched every single one that we possibly could. At this stage, the research points really didn't have any value anymore. I would continue to keep collecting them and not even need them. To even further slow down the enemies, I added more pillars behind the ones that were currently built. It seemed like for the most part, at least recently, the monsters kept attacking on the north and west sides. It was pretty obvious that the weakest side of the castle was on this side, so it makes sense why they were focusing it. I was really shocked because I had no idea how the monster population sustained. They were sending in so many monsters every single night and completely losing all of them. At this point, I wouldn't even be surprised if us and the air traders were the only ones left on this planet. It just seems so unlikely that anybody else was able to survive this amount of monsters. We're barely doing it. When I say barely surviving, I mean it. Apparently, one of the walls had a collapse and a soldier fell to his death. Honestly, that's probably the worst way to die. falling off a wall into a pit of monsters. We finally got an easy night. The attack was happening from the eastern wall, which you know I love. The troops made their way up into position and barely even had enough space to all fit up there. The monsters, firstly the horse ones, charged into our little bottleneck. They were met with spikes and lots of explosions, just as planned. The abominations were next. They started heading directly towards the choke point, and of course, they got stuck. It looked like there were at least 40 to 50 monsters waiting to get their chance to try and attack the wall. It was pretty hilarious, honestly. They were wiggling around like they were at a concert or something. This wave honestly felt like it took forever. The choke point definitely does slow things down around here, but it makes it a lot more safe. Really quick to break character, I ended up speeding up this part by 4 times, and it still took this long for all of the monsters to slowly funnel in. After surviving another couple nights, and constantly replacing my mist fuel collectors, I realized that I think I'm always just going to be at negative mist fuel. I could only come up with 2 solutions for this issue. The first was to build some walls around a mist pit, and the second was to find some spots to hide the mist collectors where the enemies wouldn't go. Even though it wasn't much, I ended up going with the second option, and got 3 more mist fuel. I really didn't want to have to build more walls, because then it would disrupt the pathing of the monsters. Holy, another light night I guess you could say. Since I was always zooming in and getting all close and personal with the monsters, I decided to check out the castle from a top-down perspective. It was pretty cool, not gonna lie. The army was able to fight off night after night after night of endless horrors. It was honestly going a lot smoother than I thought it would. Well, at least it was, until I realized there was a little detachment of monsters that were taking down the eastern wall. They already made it through 1 layer. I had no troops over there to move in and take them out, so I had to move some from one of the other walls. I really had no idea if they were going to be able to make it there in time before another layer went down. Right as they arrived onto the walls, some more stones came tumbling down. There were only 2 more layers preventing the monsters from being able to get into the castle. And now it looked like a whole bunch of enemies were now heading to this wall because it was the weakest side of the castle. I ended up sending as many troops as I possibly could over here while also taking care of the other sides. This is definitely the farthest that the monsters have gotten in all 91 days that we've been surviving. Unfortunately enough, I didn't have enough wood to build the gates the rest of the walls would be sitting on. I then completely forgot that I didn't even repair it and went through a whole nother invasion without getting the repairs done. That could have been very risky, but we survived, so no worries. I then finally made the repairs and continued our fight to survive in this cruel world. Even though I said this a million times, I'm still in shock the amount of enemy monsters that show up on our doorstep every single night. There's actually thousands. Things looked pretty crowded on the eastern wall, with all of our troops up there and all of that. So I decided to expand backwards by 1 block. This is actually going to allow us to expand by 2. If I utilize those arches that overhang a little bit, then I could technically have 2 spaces. Before I do that though, let's get these poor troops out of the little gap that I created. And perfect, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Now's the fun part. I have to move the troops around and do the same thing for the rest of the wall. Oh yeah, and did I forget to mention, this is all going on during the middle of a raid. Now that we have the extra space, I don't really know what to do with it. I can't train any more soldiers because we're not able to increase our military cap anymore. I ended up placing down a whole bunch of fire arrows. I planned on sending all of the crossbowmen all the way back there because they could actually shoot the monsters still from that range. The aftermath of that single invasion was pretty intense. There were quite a lot of blocks missing, and I had to fill them all in. Now that's a lot of damage, especially from 1 night. It seemed like the monsters really didn't want us to make it to day 100. It felt like every single day they were just becoming a lot more ruthless. In the past it felt like it was every 10 or so. We even ended up almost completely losing the whole wall on the northwestern corner. I'm not gonna even lie, I have no idea how we even survived that. Most of the wall was missing, and a lot more blocks were ready to come down. I made my repairs to the walls the same day, and then it was smooth sailing from there once again. The nights were flying by, at least until night 100. Our whole town was completely shaking, because we all knew that since the waves were getting stronger and stronger, This last one, Wave 100, was gonna be the worst of them all. I made as many preparations as I possibly could. I wanted to make sure we had pillars everywhere, spikes everywhere, and any kind of trap that was possible out and on the field. It was time. The monsters were approaching. They were only attacking the west side of the castle, which was very nice. I had all of my troops scattered around the walls on that side. I made sure then to start organizing them and placing them in the perfect locations for maximum damage. Well, here we go. Be prepared for anything. Let's do this. The initial little monsters started running for the weakest part of my wall, which they always did. There was something about them that made them feel a whole lot faster and a whole lot more deadly. They also seemed like they were taking even more arrows than before. One thing that I forgot to account for was to have more troops on the southern wall, because whenever the enemies attack from the west, they always have little parties that come to the south. We seem to have taken out all of those little monsters that were initially attacking. The next group was a bunch of those green-headed, disgusting ones. They tend to explode, causing high damage to the walls, which is kind of annoying. Luckily enough, these guys were pretty slow. Talking about fast and slow, it looks like all of the horse monsters are coming in now. They also appear to be accompanied by the two-horned big head monsters. I was getting a little bit nervous and antsy. It looked like all of the pillars that were in the path of the monsters were pretty much destroyed, except one. And they were kind of just avoiding that one anyways. I started to get my hope back though, because I didn't see any more monsters really approaching. That was until I saw the west side. They're not even supposed to be attacking over here, and there's a whole bunch. Things started up again. It looked like more monsters started coming from the west and even the north now. What the heck is going on? In the corner of my eye, I saw the abominations finally approaching. This was both good and bad. It was good because we had taken out all of the small monsters at the beginning of the wave. Now we have to deal with all of the big and strong monsters towards the end. There were so many monsters in this invasion that I had to speed up the clip again to ×4. If I didn't, we would have had to watch this footage for over 10 minutes. More and more monsters kept arriving. It felt like they were never gonna stop. It really is a good thing that my troops don't have limited ammunition, because if they did, we would have run out by now. There were just so many monsters that it would have been impossible to have enough ammo for all of them. Right as I thought that things were dying down, it seemed like another wave of buffed abominations started to arrive. You know what? Maybe I am right. Maybe they're not gonna stop coming, at least until the castle is destroyed. I was really satisfied with my troops' performance, because even though this raid was going on for absolutely ever, it seemed like there wasn't much damage being made to the actual walls. Wait, are my eyes lying to me? Or is that the end? There were no more monsters heading towards the castle. That meant that we had successfully survived 100 nights in this apocalyptic world. Now it's time to flourish and rebuild society as much as we can. The monsters had to have learned by now that they can't mess with us, right?